It's not that way today. Drexel, at the time when I went, was known for engineering business, and then they had a college called Nesbitt, which is now Westfall. So those were the three schools primarily that you, not to say you couldn't go for other schools, but we didn't have a college of medicine, we didn't have a college of nursing, we didn't have a lot of the colleges. We've really expanded over the last 30 years. Literally, it's been 30 years. And I chose my major in finance because I did not have a sound foundation financially at home. And I put my way through college. I literally used co-op to educate myself and also to pay for my education. So I clearly had student debt, credit card debt. I teach personal finance because of this. Like, I was in a lot of financial disarray, but I liked the idea of money. It was also the late 80s when I was in college. And at the time, historically, that was a big thing. More like, maybe marketing and social media is now, or having CSR is now. Finance was a big field, but it was not a field that a lot of us went into as females. So Drexel, when I was there as a student, was 80% male. Think about that today. There's only 20% of us that were female. And then on top of it, I took a STEM major. So it was really, really very competitive. Even at Drexel at the time, I was not necessarily part of the group of fellow students in my major. I was sort of on my own. So I picked it because I liked the idea of money. I liked the idea of math. But again, it wasn't a popular major at the time for females necessarily. A lot of the 20% of the Drexel students, I felt like, although my roommate was the exception, didn't go into engineering. A lot of them headed over to, other disciplines, marketing in my college and so on and so forth. Does anybody have a question? Like that statistic now, it's equal, by the way, it's 50-50 or 60. It may be even leaning heavier towards females at this point, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. I think sometimes in some of my classes, especially in LeBow and at my co-op, I feel like kind of like an imposter because I'm the only female. How do you get over that, and how do you overcome that feeling of feeling like you're not good enough to be there?
Oh, you have to have so much of your own self-worth and confidence. I felt that way on the trading floor when I worked at Citi. I had to prove myself in a big way. It was very hard. You really have to take a lot of hits, I think, to your ego and really fight a lot of battles internally to prove that you're good enough. I outworked anybody. I just felt like I could do it if I was working harder than everybody else. I got called up to a trading floor where I didn't feel I belonged at all. I literally got called up. I didn't have the job there. The head trader at Citi at the time in my desk had a project I was working on with him, and another trader quit, and he asked if I would help him out, and I did. And I felt like an imposter in the worst of ways, because it wasn't just the fact that I was a female up there with all male traders. I'm literally going in my head right now and trying to find a female trader anywhere near where I was, and there wasn't. There's a female who sat on the sales desk that I'm thinking of, but they all were very well educated. The elite schools, the Harvards, London School of Economics, University of Chicago, and here I am, and you just have to really fight. I just didn't give up. I think I was more determined. I think you really have to be determined and know that you belong, but don't let somebody tell you who you are ever. You tell yourself who you are, have confidence in yourself and know you can do it. Because you can, nobody else should put you in your place, whatever that is.
You said you put in a lot of extra work and really buckled down on it. How did that affect your work-life balance, especially once you had a family, because we tend to send all the family chores onto the moms?
Yeah, it was brutal. I can't tell you. So when I first was working at Citi, I tell the story to my classes, but I started the day after I graduated Drexel because I didn't have any money. So I didn't take any time off. like literally we graduated at the time on a Sunday. And then I started work on Monday morning. So the first day of work was orientation and, show you where your desk is. And I shared a desk. I was at that building I showed you, 55 Water. So it was, prime New York real estate. So I shared an office, an old school office with somebody who sat behind me, who was my manager at the time. And it was 5 o'clock and nobody was leaving, nobody. And I'm like, look at my watch, and I was really tired. So I sort of was sitting there, and I didn't know what my job was because it's the first day of work. I know what activity, I was just sitting there like, what do I do now? Somebody came in and said, to my manager, let her go. It's her first day. And she said to me, all right, you can go today. Don't go. This is your break. You're not doing it again. And literally I was working 7 days a week, a lot of times, if not 6. And I worked all hours of day and night. We put in a lot of hours at the time for a lot of reasons. But when I got engaged, it took a turn, definitely. And I would say that it isn't just me that says this. I have other friends, and even sometimes people more closely in age to you guys, who have noticed their career change a little bit when they have, some family situation that starts to affect them, because it does historically fall on the female and traditional households, and you get a label, and that's the God's honest truth. I didn't do really well with work-family balance. I didn't do well with work-life balance. I didn't do well with anything other than I could work harder than anybody else, and I was fine with that. But I lost a lot of years of personal time because I wanted to work. But again, I got compensated for it, and that was my objective at the time, to get myself out of the debt I had received from coming to, college and getting on my own 2 feet. So I kind of felt like that was my trade-off. Any other questions? I can tell you some other stories on that note. One of my stories is other females I worked with. So when I left Citi, I went to JP Morgan because my husband and I got married. So I got married in 1994 and was at JP at 60 Wall, but they were moving their operations down to Christiana, Delaware, where a lot of their operations are still today. A lot of co-ops work down there. But it was the beginning of that transition at the time. And a lot of us went down. So I was looking to get promoted. I hadn't had family yet. I just got married. That was it, so that shouldn't have been like the work-family balance. My husband was working professional Drexel alum too. So we were both putting in a lot of hours, and we didn't have be home at a certain time, make dinner type of thing. Like we totally had our own. We were at the time, they called them dinks, dual income, no kids, a couple, right? We were both out there hitting the workforce and trying to make money. So when I was looking around and was looking to get promoted and then got pregnant with my first child, the people who were in the corner offices kind of looked around at who they were. So the females that were around, and there were far and few between that were the vice presidents down there at the time, were either not married, divorced, or no children. It was very, very hard to walk around an office pregnant. And I won't lie to you, it absolutely was a crushing career move to have a family at work at the time. So much so that I missed moving up the career path where I had hoped to be. So I literally traded, I feel like, and I go to my grave saying this, I traded my work for my family, and I don't regret that at all, but that's how I ended at Drexel. I mean, I missed promotion a couple of times. I had 2 children and I was not going to get promoted, and I was told I wasn't going to get promoted, and I was juggling daycare and family and everything else, and it just wasn't worth it. Like I made the cut, I was 12 years into my career and I did a U-turn.
Now, have you seen that change at all in the years since you've left industry?
What's so funny is that I always think that it has. And then I tell the stories and my older students say it hasn't. So I don't know to what extent it hasn't, but I hope that so I showed that wage gap for a reason today. I could have picked up any other statistic. I didn't want to overload you with stuff because I'm a professor and I didn't want to be like, oh, here's this, here's that. But that was kind of a telling statistic. Why is it like that? So clearly there's a reason. And the reason is a lot of times women in the workforce do have to take on a little bit more responsibility, juggling the family and home situation, and are not able to commit the same way into their career. Like there is a definite, you have to balance your work and family, but you don't necessarily always have the support you need, or just, maybe meeting expectations that are unreasonable at work. I think that there is more work-family balance, but I'll tell you a really quick story before I get to the next question. This is really good. I have a coworker at Drexel. She's full-time. She works in the department I work in. One of my departments I work in. And she and I met at JP. We were on their inaugural, I kid you not, work-family balance committee. We were having such a huge issue with women in the workplace at JP Morgan, Delaware, that they were like, who wants to be on it? And I was like, I'll be on it. I'll be on it. I had a whole voice. I had all these complaints I wanted to share with everybody. I'm like, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make work-life balance happen. I'm not going to feel guilty leaving at 5 to get my child from daycare at 6 when they close, like all of this. So there was another woman I met there that was also the same way. She's super gung-ho and she's like, we're going to make this change. Well, what happened was, and I kid you not, we're both at Drexel today. We both quit JP Morgan. Take it for what it is. Nothing happened. All right. So I can say at the time that nothing changed. And there may be protocols, there may be things in place where they're not discriminating, but there's not everything has to be so defined, right? There's always that gray area where you may not get opportunities. And that's what I think is the issue sometimes. Any other questions?
One question that I have is, as a mother and as a professional, what's it like? Because when you were going back into the workforce, because I've watched my mom, and as a mom, you gain skills, or just as a parent in general, you gain skills that other people are not going to have, even if they spend all of their time at work. So what was that like, going back into the workforce with all of those new skills, but then also not being able to have opportunities that you would have done extremely well in?
It's so true. I'm laughing. I think it's a great question. So the skill set I learned was to chill out. I was a super type A plus personality. I was nothing short of nasty. I was, back to Rowan's comment earlier, nobody was telling me what I was going to do. I was going out there and I was going to absolutely do the best I could do and work the hardest and outwork everybody and make the most money and get to a certain career objective and all. When I had children, I learned to chill. I learned how to mellow out. I learned how to take things that you can't always plan for. You have to learn how to be adaptable. Kids will do that to you every time. My children got sick whenever I had an important meeting. And you know what, when your children are sick and you have an important meeting, guess what goes second? You always have to take care of, and you learn that it's not the end of the world if you can't be in 2 places at once. And that was kind of their great skill sets I learned. But I also think at the time, honestly, I matured a lot because I was so just bent on trying to be, somebody that I had aspired to be, someone in, making a huge name for themselves, doing really well in their career. And I worked really hard to try to get there. And I kept on getting these little dings that stopped me from doing that. And I think having a child and then having subsequent children made me just appreciate life a lot more and realize that not all life is about work. You really do need a balance. And I always now, as an older person, take it for what it is, but don't put all of your eggs at work, because life goes so fast. You really need the time to just love life, really enjoy your life. Don't worry about the other stuff.
I had a question going off of that. I know a lot of my friends are, meant to be mothers, and they're super excited about that part of their life. And I think sometimes a reason why I wouldn't want to have kids is because of my career. Is that common in your field? And then how do you overcome that and realize that you can do both? And how did you make that choice?
Rowan, when I was your age, I was not having children. Like there was no way I was having kids. I ended up having 3, like really, and I don't regret, clearly I would never regret a minute of it, the choice, but for the longest time I refused. Like we had friends that were having children before we were, and they were, oh, career, she was all career. It was a lot of stigma, negative stigma for me not having children right away. So I feel like, yeah, you definitely, I see a lot of students like on Facebook that I've taught that are now moms, which is so sweet, and I know that they worked really hard through Drexel to get to a career. But I from what I can gather from social media for what it is, I know it's social media, it is what it is. But as far as posting and what their accomplishments are, it's always their children, and you do make a trade-off. Like I think there's a point when you can decide, not everybody needs to have the traditional family either. There's plenty of people who are super successful in their careers and they are 100% satisfied with that too. I'll tell you one crazy story. Another one, I said I have a million stories, I'm not joking. I told this story in class, just I'll start this before, but I had a very, very good friend in college at Drexel. She was my roommate eventually, but we lived on the same floor at Towers my freshman year, and we lost touch. I graduated a year earlier than she did because I had no money. So I had to get out, and I did, and I was working really hard, and I went to City in New York. She went to City in Baltimore. I found out this just a few short years ago. She actually came back to Drexel to do some work as an alum, because she did super great, and I want to call her out live, so I won't, but she did super great in her career, and she should be super proud of what she did for sure, if she ever watches this. But anyhow, we sat down and we had lunch. So we went to a park in Philadelphia. One day she came in and we caught up on literally 25 years of stuff. And we went, Rowan, side by side. Like I graduated, I went to Citibank. She graduated, she went to Citibank. She went here, I went here, blah, 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 blah. I got married. She knew who I married, but we had lost touch. It wasn't social media. There was landlines, you didn't really keep in touch with everybody the same way. But she didn't do the family thing, and she ended up doing phenomenal in her career. And you have to know that both sets of the equation are perfect for whoever you want to be and what you want to accomplish in your life. There is no right or wrong answer. And you can change course, Rowan, like when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50. So this particular individual I saw on social media just got married, and she's in her 50s. So you know what? Like it's all cool.
You brought up 2 things there I think are very interesting. One, it seemed like in the workplace, you were being stigmatized for trying to have a family, and outside the workplace, you were stigmatized for not trying to have a family, right? So you kind of get a double hit there, which is really fun. And second, there's throughout your talk, you've really been talking about that divide about, both are great, and both are great individually, less so about being able to do both at the same time. What do you think about like having to make that choice? It seems almost, do you think that's good or bad? Like personally, I kind of see it as you shouldn't have to make that choice whether or not you want to have a successful family and a successful life that way, or have a successful career.
Yeah, it's not easy. Life is all, I do think you have to make choices in life though. I think you have to kind of make some kind of plan. But yeah, you're right. I got it from both sides. I mean, everybody has an opinion, right? Everybody has their thoughts on what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And again, back to the beginning of the talk, when Rowan asked the very first or second question, or I think maybe it was Crystal asked the first question about that, like be who you are. I think that's the hardest thing when you're younger, is you're still worried about all the extra noise. And I wish we could all like get rid of that noise and just be confident in our decisions But when you're in your 20s or late teens, a lot of the external factors come into play to kind of, give opine about what you're going to do, right? Whether you're here or there. So I think, yeah, I do think you have to make choices. Certainly, but you have to do what's right for you and, the choices that you make. I don't even know what else to say about that. I just feel like whatever I did for what I won't even say wanted to do at the time, because a lot of choices, Kai, were made for me. Like my promotion, not getting a promotion 3 years in a row. My choice was made. The writing was on the wall. I left. Like I was like, I'm out, so you don't always get to make your choices. And it's not like I wouldn't have still been employed, but I wasn't getting what I wanted. So I think that sometimes there's events that happen that kind of force you to, play your hand, like, and I think that's kind of where you have to organically figure out what's best for you at that time.
I have a question. So
Mhm.
in some ways we're talking about this on a really personal level, but on a more systemic level, what do you see as possible avenues for making this a bit less either or, specifically for women and other caretakers, because we don't see this pressure as much on men, and specifically, middle class white men?
Mhm. It's a great talk. So a great point. So I will say this: I never felt and I don't mean to bash of my female audience tonight, but I never felt pressure from the males I worked with. Just so you know, in corporate, it was the females. So when I wrote on the last slide, females elevating females, the males I worked with were never the ones giving me a hard time about, I may not have gotten promoted, but they weren't the ones necessarily that I felt like stopped me from growing. It was more female on female type of, not elevating each other type of relationships. I felt like there was a lot of, I'm going to go on a limb and guess that a lot of people, because they have to make a choice, maybe band together if they choose this avenue versus this avenue. And it's the, proverbial, back to Jaziel's thing, stay-at-home mom versus working mom and all, right? So I feel like there's a lot of competition and judgment, and that kind of goes through into the workforce. So I'm hoping that at some point we have more of a band of people working together to all move up together and not worry about what's happening personally in their lives, and not judge based on personal decisions, and rather judge on how well we perform in the workplace. And I'm hoping that that goes away, because we've learned over the last year and a half how to work from home. And there's plenty of people, professionals working where no matter what your gender is, you're taking care of children at home while somebody else is on Zoom trying to work and do all the things that are happening, right? So I'm hoping that things will sort of shift where we're not so much, maybe because we're not going to be so essentially office, integrated for quite some time. I would think that this will be more permanent than not, right? Based on what Microsoft is doing and Google and all, and they realize that remote work can be a thing. Maybe we can kind of get away from the old stereotypical roles and know that work can get done at different hours and in different conditions. Let's hope. That's my goal.
One question that I would have is, what do you think is kind of the threshold for that work-life balance? Like how much work could women or like parents who decide to have families do while also trying to pursue their career? Because my mom, she graduated from Drexel too, worked for a few years, was doing super well. And then she decided to start having kids, had kids like back to back for almost 20 years. And then now she's about to graduate from Villanova Law School with a 5-year-old. So it's been really cool watching her go through that and then start to gradually go back into choosing her career. So what do you think is like that the threshold of balance? And also, how can we make choosing to be a mother not be seen as a lesser choice to choosing to work, and vice versa? Because I think that that can happen a lot too, where people don't see how like insanely like amazing it is to also choose that route, because it's an insane amount of work. It's like at least 100 hours a week. So
It's a lot of work. Yeah, for sure. You see it firsthand, I'm sure. Oh my goodness, with the little ones, for sure. Well, first of all, kudos to your mother. That's a huge, huge celebration. I hope you guys do something amazing for her. It's not easy when you've been out of the workforce to go back into the workforce and to switch careers like that. I was not financially able to I didn't take any time off in between. I actually overlapped Drexel and JP Morgan, but I did. All right. So I was working Drexel at night, and then I was working JP during the day. So I was just straight through. But when I did start off at Drexel, I took a major time shift back towards me, because professors don't work the same hours as people on Wall Street, right? As far as your question with when do you find the shift? So the experience, or what I've read and what I know from my peer group who did take time off of work, it's super hard to go back into the workforce because a lot of technology has changed. Like if a peer of mine went as a marketing major 30 years ago, and then now their last child went off to college, to go back into that field, you have to think you're not up with all of the new technology, all of the new trends. So I feel like that's a lot of where the pay gap comes in, honestly, is that you're kind of starting out again. And I don't know if anybody else has a parent who took time off, but I do know that my friends who have taken time off, who are all educated, really well educated, but they have taken lesser jobs because they had that gap, and they weren't necessarily qualified or educated in current technologies to do something like someone just coming out of Drexel this year. So that's the trade-off. You're not going to be able to step back in like you did before unless you kind of stay in. So I feel like you do have to make trade-off decisions in order to maintain, and I'm probably going to say it's the wrong way because that's not true with your mom, but she went back and got a whole nother degree, right? But I do feel like you have to kind of keep your toe in the water a little bit before you have a huge gap, or at least continue to get educated or do something for personal and professional betterment to keep you out there. I also have friends that do consulting that left industry, and there's always something you can do that doesn't have to be a full-time type of thing, but just to keep you your professional you alive, if that makes sense. You have a question, Kai?
Yeah. So in your experience working in industry, I'm assuming you've seen many different types of people there. How have you seen any interactions between people who are like doubly hit? You experience yourself to an extent too, because Wall Street's a very much a American cultural staple of an institution where it's very much founded on that whole upper class, right schools, right, you come from the right class, to go do this. And you, like you're describing, did not come from that class. How have you seen this in other people, or have you seen this in other people who might face issues similar, but, slightly different, like Black men,
possibly
trans women,
Right. Absolutely. I'm hoping, Kai, that there's way more awareness. I hope that there's way more. So I came from New York, and I do know that what you're saying, you have the Harvard white male, trader or whatever. And I literally am naming somebody who was from Harvard that was a white male trader that I worked with. So we do have that, but also I think if you are in certain professions, I think that the area that you're into, I'm hoping, like if you're in an urban environment and maybe, on each coast, possibly like in New York, I never felt there wasn't that diversity, that acceptance in New York, because it's New York and everybody belongs in New York because it's such a melting pot of everyone. But I don't know. I can't speak to how other, if you're in a satellite office somewhere, or you're I don't have enough experience.
I'm really speaking to this as my dad has a history in real estate. My family has a history in real estate. So you definitely see it there, especially in the Philly area and the New York area as well. Same thing with the upper levels of a Teamster union, which they were also have been involved in, or in the industry that I'm going into, computer science. You know, the Bay Area is sure an urban area, but when you talk about computer science, there is long-standing issues within diversity in the tech industry specifically, and
Absolutely.
definitely in the standard type of Wall Street. I mean,
Yeah, I can't speak to it because I don't have experience with it at this
It's
point.
one of those.
And sadly, Kai, I'm going to even say this, I'm getting so old that it's been so long since I've been out that there's been so much more awareness and openness in society, thank goodness, in the first place, since the, you know, days where you kind of, you know,
Yeah, from all
nothing
the
was
people,
really, what's
from all
this?
people I know, like I've heard stories from them where you wore the wrong tie to work, right? And you heard about it, whether
Oh,
that
yeah.
whether that be your tie wasn't, you know, that $100 brand name one, or whether it be that you're a day trader. Why are you wearing that good $200, $300, $400 tie that you thrifted, or that you've really saved up for to get? The boss should be wearing that tie, not you. Why are you trying to do that? So see what I mean, where it's,
Yes. And so there's labels. I have to tell you this crazy story. We grabbed a hold of the JP Morgan, and this is before JP Morgan was Chase, handbook one time. I don't know how somebody found it at my office when I was at 60 Wall. We laughed. So it's literally a handbook on how employees should dress. So when you're saying this, Kai, I just started laughing because I forgot all about it. So I cut off my hair. I have really long hair, but it wasn't there. I wasn't getting job offers. I cut it off before I started working. When I cut my hair, I got a job offer at Citi. And you had to dress a certain way, and you had to wear the white shirt. And the shirt and the shoes and the tie and everything, you had to fit a certain profile. Like everybody literally looked the same. So this handbook came up and it spelled it all out. It's totally illegal now. But if you go back into archives somewhere, you can find corporate handbooks where they tell you what you can wear and what you can't. And in the 70s in the US, when I was a kid, you weren't allowed to have piercings. So forget about the earrings, forget about any other piercings, right? And you couldn't have your hair covering your ears, and you couldn't have this, and you couldn't have that. And they literally wrote it out in a book that they gave their employees. So I'm too young for that situation. But when I did work up in New York, yes, as far as what people projected was the corporate image, the company image of the Wall Street institution. And yes, you did not deviate. I had a blue suit, I had a black suit, and I had a gray suit. And that was it. There was no color. And I always wore a white shirt. So, boring, but that's what we did. And that's how you fit in. You had to fit the molds, and those that didn't got in trouble for it. And I won't say any more stories, but I did have coworkers who had been sent home because of wearing inappropriate attire. No lie, sent home.
Do you think that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that Wall Street is an industry that you could see like change in that, as far as the strictness and like dress, and if someone wants to dye their hair a certain color, or is that just, and from your experience, do you just think that is going to end up being one of the anomalies, that as the culture is progressing, Wall Street just like doesn't?
I can't imagine, I don't even know because I have no experience with them, but I would imagine some of these older firms, established firms, would not be willing necessarily to really diversify, but I can't speak for them at all. I would hope that they would, but it's funny that you say, I do think certain industries, like I was saying, have certain unsaid or unspoken rules. And I think that they will be followed until there's a turnover. And if you have enough turnover when the current leaders go into retirement and take a back seat, and the new leaders come up, that's when you start seeing these things transition. And that's what's so important about women in the workforce too. I hoped that in 30 years that women would have been like, oh, you're having a family, congratulations. I literally had a student tell me she left her job somewhere in Philly because she got engaged. I mean, she just got married this past December, and she left because they put her on a different career path. She felt like that was a stigma. Like, come on, it's a ring. Like, there's nothing different about the person at all. It means nothing other than it's something personal to that person, and it's kind of a personal part of her life coming through work. So I'm just hoping at some point that we have this huge shift where we're out with the old and with the new, and more open to being accepting of everybody, right? Maybe in the next 30 years.
So the pandemic has given women a whole new set of challenges. And I know, at least in my family, like my brother's doing, well, now he's back in person, but he was doing online school for a long time. And my mom had to change around some of her work to make that work. Do you think we're going to see an even bigger wage gap after the pandemic, and after we can look back because of how many women have had to drop out of work or taken, not been able to move up or whatever?
Great question. Oh, I hope not. I hope not. I hope that instead we just kind of become more accepting and understanding, because just because you can't be on between certain hours, most jobs don't have that. You have the ability to do your work around your schedule. Yeah, it's a difference. Like, you can get your work done. And I hope that that doesn't affect anybody in a negative way, because you're having to monitor your child at home and make sure you're trading your child's success for your success. That's an awful transition, an awful trade-off, right? Does my child not do well in school because I have to do well at work? I would not want to be in that situation right now at all. So no, I hope that the wage gap continues to close. And the wage gap, again, I think a lot of it was that women were leaving the workforce because of families, and then re-entering the workforce. You're not making that money that you would have if you stayed in, for the duration, I think, or just kind of continue to be career. So I don't think it's necessarily if you have male, female starting at the same point in time with the only difference is gender distinction. I think that you can kind of move up the ladder, hopefully along the same pay scale, without any discrimination on that. But I think it's the fact that we kind of, from what I read at least, we have access to education now. That was a huge barrier earlier, but there's more women in higher education than men. And, you should be compensated for the level of education, experience, and knowledge that you're bringing into a job, regardless of what you're doing in your personal life and how you're doing it in your personal life, as long as you're getting your work done. Any other questions? Trying to think, just tell you guys. I'm telling you, it was rough out there. It was hard. It was very hard. I missed my first promotion. I got pregnant. So I will say this on Facebook Live. I don't care. But I was told by somebody at work, for real, they pulled me aside and said that the reason I didn't get promoted was because of a pregnancy. It's totally illegal, had no evidence, couldn't do anything about it. But when the decision was made, it was made because of a pregnancy, and that is wrong. I was going on maternity leave. I was able to do my job. It's a shame because I left, but ultimately I feel so blessed that I left. Honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. And I didn't leave right then. I continued on. I finished up my graduate degree, had another baby. I was really ambitious when I was younger, and then I didn't get promoted again and again. And I'm like, writing's on the wall, I'm on the mommy track. And that is documented type of phenomenon. I was on the mommy track for sure. And I just said that was enough. So it was fine. It was a great job that I love now. So any other questions? Did I do what I was supposed to do today? Did this work? I feel like I would. But that's all the experience I have. In terms of Drexel, because I've never had any gender inequality.
Did you need your friend to sneak you in where?
Oh, I'm sorry. I went to my internet connection just.
He's not gonna sneak into this hall.
Was about to do it like last week.
He has to.
Raina, you're on.
Okay. I was like, and then it said my internet connection was unstable. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm going to be to the robot voice if I become unstable. Does anybody else have a question for me?
Well, I was kind of curious. You kind of just talked about like you've had a good experience at Drexel, and I just imagine like the culture of like the business world is like so different than the academic world, but I guess that there's still that like competition and I don't know, just if you could.
No, there is. You're still in a career. I know we look like, you know, we're in front of the room, we're the sage on stage, you know, we're there to profess to you all of our teachings, but we are people, professors are people too, all of us, right? So objectives, some of us write and do research, and some of us community, and some of us try to do a little of everything. It's not necessarily as competitive, honestly, Jennifer, at all. I think because we're more in isolated silos in a way, we're autonomous employees. We don't necessarily have a lot of interaction with each other, and that's not a bad thing because we're able to be self-sufficient. We're not doing the team dynamic as much as corporate. Corporate is all about that, you know, team type of response, interaction and coworkers and all that, and we don't have that. So maybe that's why I don't feel as much of any. I just don't, honestly, at the university, I never felt any inequalities like I did. I think I came out of like the worst situation in corporate. So I think no matter what came from Drexel, I would have been, because that was devastating to me, honestly. I was devastated. Really, I think I deserved it. I think I had earned it. And I think that it should have happened the way it did, but I'm glad now it did. I was mad at the time. I was really mad.
Sort of speaking to the Drexel component, what do you see as sort of places that Drexel isn't succeeding in this? I mean, I know of people who have, I think you said earlier, this sort of mommy track thing that happens at Drexel. Other forms of sort of like inequalities and inequities happen at Drexel. Where are spaces that you know, from your experience having seen it in the corporate world, that could be improved upon in the university setting?
I think the communication's huge. I think that important in nation, why, and make sure that you, if there's anything that can help others, I think instead of having that grapevine situation or the gossipy, it's called back channel sometimes, dialogue, and rather your managers and leaders in an organization be forthcoming and be very transparent about decision making, about who, why, how, you know, instead of just kind of putting things in place without really having people understand the reasoning behind it, would get rid of all of this, you know, uncertainty. And so there are a lot of decisions that do come through at the university as well as did in corporate that you kind of shake your head. I can say that they don't affect me personally, so I can't really speak to them, but I know that they do affect some of my peers, and you just wonder why. Like, and I think that, like I said, if communication is and then you don't have to worry about it because we're all on the same page on what had happened within reason. But the non-transparency, I think, is a huge issue in any type of business, regardless if it's Drexel or corporate. Does anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna say if we have no other questions, we can wrap it up. Just want to make sure nobody else has anything to add. No? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. I'm going to quickly promote our Instagram and our Facebook. We have somewhat of a new Instagram, so go ahead and follow it. It's just, I always try to do this and you can never see it, but it's just every week I do this, you can never see it, but it's just Drexel Chai Chats. We post our upcoming Chai Chat, and then hopefully we can have some other little videos coming up soon about Chai Chats for next term and, sneak peek stuff. So go ahead and follow us there. And then on Facebook, we're just Drexel Chai Chats. You can like it, follow it, be live stream. So if you feel like you can't log into the Zoom, you can still view it there. So yeah. I'll let anybody else add anything from the Chai Chats team. All right, well, thank you guys so much. And thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. We really appreciate it. And your story is so important to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It was very nice. It's nice to meet you all. You can find me on campus. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys. I hope I did okay. Did I do okay?
Yes, you did great.
Is that what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
great. It was a really great discussion. Hopefully.
It was? Okay. I get nervous. All
What
right.
classes do you teach?
I am in, so I teach in accounting, finance, and general